Hello, I'm Janice Ellig, CEO of the Ellig Group, Executive Search Advisors, where we are reimagining search by our long-standing commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Thank you for joining us today for another webinar in our series where we invite thought leaders and subject matter experts to offer their advice to help guide us through these difficult times. Today's topic is particularly important because it is on driving diversity, equity, inclusion during a crisis, which we are all going through today. And I am truly delighted to welcome today's guest, an outstanding leader of diversity inclusion initiatives at multiple companies. Herschel Herndon is Chief Diversity Officer for Thrivent Financial, a Fortune 300 company in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Herschel and his team are responsible for building a strong internal and external partnerships that support Thrivent's growth, talent, recruitment, and strategic community partnerships. And where DEI is truly becoming the company's DNA and how it operates each and every day. We invite our audience's participation, and we will try to get to as many questions as possible live. And if not, we will send you an email with responses to your questions. So welcome, Herschel. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have much to cover. And you truly are an expert, having been in many companies and many industries in this very difficult area of diversity and inclusion. And so we want to cover with you today how you have really made this happen and have it come alive, not just at Thrivent, but at other companies, because it's a very difficult task. I know, because we have placed diversity and inclusion executives, and while you may hire in people of underrepresented groups, it doesn't always mean that they have been included and feel inclusion in their company. So give us a little bit of your background and then tell us why you made the move to Thrivent, why it was so compelling for you.
Thank you, Janice. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you may be. I'm excited to be here with you this afternoon. Before I go a little bit deeper into the answer that Janice would like for me to address, I wanted to thank each of you for being on the call on this webinar. We know that we're in some very difficult and challenging times that we haven't seen before in our history. We are dealing with a pandemic. We have some social unrest. We have economic uncertainty. So I want to send best wishes to each of you and your families and your loved ones, that everyone is safe and well. And thank you for being here. And on behalf of Thrivent, our leadership, our HR team, and all of our employees and our associates and stakeholders and clients, I'm excited to be here with you this afternoon. So we're going to cover much ground, and we're going to do it with some energy, emotion, excitement, and enthusiasm. So thank you for joining us. Regarding the question of what excited me about joining Thrivent, there are really two key areas I really want to focus on. Number one is leadership, commitment, and support, and then also the foundation that provided me to leverage my experiences to do some innovative and paradigm shifting work in partnership with our leadership team, as well as our employees, associates, and all stakeholders to drive outcomes in support of our business growth and objectives. So really key at this point in my career, I've been at 5 different companies, 5 industries, US and international. So I've had a chance to really experience some of the processes that have led to success and opportunities that have provided us a chance to learn. So I'm excited to be here at Thrivent, and with this environment and the leadership commitment and support, it really was the defining moment and factor that drove me here.
So Herschel, it is a very difficult role, right, that you have, and every diversity and inclusion leader does. I mean, I know that you got support from Terry Rasmussen, CEO of Thrivent, because that's part of why you joined. When she was doing the search, she said she owns it, but she needs a leader to drive it. So talk a little bit about what you need to do as the leader of diversity, equity, inclusion, what what's the key thing that you need first from her and the leaders, but in driving this in a company, what do you need to have from her and others to really make this part of the DNA of a company? Because I know our listeners want to know, what do they need to do also in their companies?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Really, really love that question. Think about success factors for DNI that I've learned as we just talked about throughout my career. And I'd like for the audience and the listeners to think about number one, support. You have to have support at the board of directors level, the CEO, your executive leadership team. As we have at Thrivent, our chief HR officer, my fellow and sister colleagues on our HR team, all employees and associates have to feel an engagement and ownership that they are a part of this story. It's not about someone else, it's about them. And so having the leadership support really sets that up. And how do you know that? You can really begin to look at time, money, and resources. You can understand what companies value based on where they put their investment and where they spend their money. And in our case, we are really seeing significant investment to build out operating support infrastructure for the work to deliver on some very specific initiatives and outcomes. And also that we are really supported with leadership engagement throughout the entire organization. I would like to say that it's probably the best, no, it is the best I've seen in terms of support and engagement in my entire career. And that's saying quite a bit given where I've been. And number two, it's about strategy, structure, and execution. In our case, we're going to focus on three pillars: talent and culture. We're going to focus on growth, and we're going to focus on strategic partnerships, which enable either our growth strategy or the way we bring on new talent, acquire talent, keep talent, and develop talent. So that strategy, structure, and execution plan is really critical. And then third and last, metrics. And I'm going to expand on that a little bit later. But to be successful in today's environment, those are the things that you'll look for around in the ingredients of success around support, strategy, structure, and execution and metrics.
And I understand you're building partnerships in communities, correct? I mean, so you're going into some um, diverse communities with underrepresented groups. You're building your financial advisors to represent those communities. So you want to build partnerships to have your financial advisors reflect the communities you're serving. And so you're building those teams to really serve those communities as well, so they can speak that language. So that's being built as well, right? Those community relationships.
Absolutely. And one of the highlights of the excitement that I have about Thrivent is not only do we focus on our corporate associates, but we're also going to be focusing on our field associates and integrating the efforts to create what we're calling a One Thrivent approach to best serve our communities and the clients that are going to be a critical part of our success moving forward. So one of the important things we have to realize is as our country continues to change and have more diversity and different growth factors throughout our country, what are we doing to ensure that we can help our financial associates and field partners best adapt and understand what relates to those clients? How do we listen to them? And what will differentiate us in a way that is valuable because we've understood and didn't seek to just try to bring solutions without understanding first. So that's going to be a really critical part of our work moving forward.
So I understand there's a major transformation going on, right, through Thrivent, which includes a whole branding, right? You've got Thrive with Purpose. There's a new marketing campaign, but this transformational roadmap includes diversity and inclusion as part of that roadmap. Is that right?
Absolutely.
So
And
that's part of the measurement that you have for people as well?
well, actually, what as a prelude to our measurement discussion, the reason that's strategically important is it positions DNI along with our partners in talent management and talent acquisition as a collective strong unit to really support our org and culture initiative as part of the transformation. The real key takeaway is that D&I is not a standalone. It's not off to the side of the business. It's really integrated into our transformation roadmap.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we've developed a three-pronged approach to really help execute that around our talent and culture as a pillar, our growth, and then the community and partnerships. And talent and culture simply is what are we doing to support talent acquisition, retention, career development, employee business resource groups. We call them now business resource networks, and a positive and inclusive culture for our workforce. Growth is really about supporting sales and service of our existing and new clients in diverse markets, as we just talked about. And then last, community and partnerships, which focus on supporting diverse alliances and associations that'll help Thrivent leverage greater access and opportunities. So those three pillars will lay the foundation, along with the integration in our transformation roadmap for how we will progress and keep those foundational elements first and foremost in the minds of all of our associates.
So, Herschel, I was in corporate America and now I do executive search. You make it sound so easy. And I know that you cannot change the minds and hearts of people overnight. And I remember being in corporate America and we spent millions of dollars, not thousands, millions of dollars over the years trying to, have these unconscious bias training sessions and what have you. And, it didn't, and that was like 20 years ago. And we're still doing this. I understand it. You try and make it work. It doesn't always work. I heard, though, that you've got something happen almost unconsciously, that people are buying and reading the book, How to Overcome, How to Become Anti-Racist, right? So they're reading this book. So maybe you've got the secret sauce here that you don't need all the training programs. They're doing this. Is that changing part of the culture? Is that helping?
Well, I'd like to take kind of two approaches to that response. Thank you for bringing that up. We're really proud of that. The book by Ibram Kendi, How to Be an Anti-Racist, really followed a series of what we call listening circles following the death of George Floyd that provided an opportunity for employees and associates to talk about how they were feeling, allow for us to listen, to demonstrate a skill of listening and responding respectfully to the perspectives of others without judgment and with certain specific respectful behaviors to guide the interactions. And after each of those sessions, almost about 600 or so associates went through those sessions over a period of about 8 different listening circles. And so the reason this is important is, and going back to the support, when our CEO, Terry Rasmussen, learned about some of the resources, one of the as the books, she said, hey, I want to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to read that book. And so we set up a partnership in our alignment with Amazon and Thrivent to make it easy. And to this point, over 1,000 books have been ordered since the end of June. And we're now getting ready to move into what we call learning circle book groups to not only just read and discuss that particular book, but what can we do to better understand some of the principles and concepts, and then look at how we can apply it in our work and in our personal lives. And we've got over 25 people that have been invited to serve as facilitators. And we're going to, again, keep the learning in a way that's very personal. And some folks said to me, hey, Herschel, we want you to know that was some of the best training we went through. And Janice, I wanted to say, shh, don't tell them. It really wasn't training. It was really a new approach to listening and guiding and facilitating. And sometimes we as leaders, we have to mandate, we have to direct. But what we are discovering is the importance of meeting people where they are, setting some parameters for learning, and then guide and facilitate and listen. And we're seeing people are excited about that. And this is very personal to individuals, so that we meet them where they are. And so that's what's exciting about that example of leadership. And we're pleased with where we're going with that. in the
That's
future.
a fantastic approach. I do think that, does supersede many of the, maybe formal training. It really is meeting them where they are and really listening. So that's how that started. And then the book came about from that. And then Terry having everybody then speaking about that book. That's wonderful. So that will continue, Herschel? Those,
Yes, absolutely. We're actually, that's the first book, and we will have a second book starting in September. The training sessions start in a few weeks, and then we're going to have the discussion groups. We're looking at possibly 60 individuals or associates per discussion group in breakout sessions of about 15 each, so they can have a chance to really be a little bit more personal and more selective in terms of just what they share in terms of a smaller group versus a larger group. So we're excited about that. But also it is a part of some ongoing initiatives that we're going to innovate around. To your point, you said you've seen a lot from unconscious bias or various other trainings that have been used prominently and to varying degrees of success. But we're also looking at ways to engage our CEO, our board of directors, and also setting up a very specific approach to leverage our leadership and our board to really look at the progress we're making, the changes or policies and practices and processes we need to consider, and what best practices we need to learn about and try to emulate as well. So that's another example of, well, what'll be different and what'll be better in this space that we are very excited about, and that we have a leadership team that is open to innovate and try new ideas and approaches.
so you see your senior team, and then do you see the next levels and the next levels embracing all that's going on that Terry Rasmussen, CEO, and that you and the other senior teams are leading?
Yes, I think we are definitely setting up the foundation for broader implementation because, as you know, it's not just only what is said or done at the top, it's how leaders internalize the work and what it means to them and their success at all levels of the organization. And we are going to set up some innovative approaches. One of the things we're going to do is set up what's called a DISCO team, DISKO, not DISCO, Diversity Inclusion Strategy Kickoff, where we're going to engage a number of associates who will be focused on the strategy, sharing presentations, listening to feedback, distributing the information throughout the organization, where it's not simply top down, but it's bottom up, and where we're also ensuring that we meet our leaders at a place where they can hear the message, it's adapted to their needs, and that we have been sensitive to what's important to helping them be successful. So that's something we'll be doing moving forward as well. So that's a great point to focus on. How do you get it distributed throughout your organization?
When you look out there on what has happened with, we really have a tsunami happening, and, with the loss of jobs, the economic downturn, the social unrest, the pandemic, an election coming up. There's so much uncertainty. These times are so difficult. Um, what do you think that leaders and people such as yourself and CEOs need to do more of in companies, in the organizations, to help employees and people just, through these difficult times?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think I'll leave you and our audience with several key points. Number one, as we just stated earlier, we set up listening circles. We didn't set up talking circles or teaching circles or mandating circles or requirement circles. We set up listening circles. And one of the first things leaders can do is to listen and learn and understand what's important to our associates, what will help them be successful, how can we help drive their career development, how do we create the right climate and culture for their success. I call it the 3 C's: career, culture, and climate. You nail those, you really have a great opportunity to engage and best utilize the talent in your organization. And then also look at new ideas that you can apply that help create success for everyone in our organization. I think it's important to mentor and coach. Beverly Tatum, who wrote the book about 20 years ago, Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria, recently shared some very insightful data which showed that about 80% of our leaders today are somewhat insular, and that they only are mostly associating with people like themselves. And so how do we begin to help people mentor and coach and lead others who are different than them, who they can in turn help grow, who stand on their shoulders one day as we are standing on the shoulders of others? So I think those are the things that we can set up for our leaders around listening, around learning, around understanding, applying new knowledge, and then, of course, mentoring and coaching across a broad set of differences to ensure that we're touching a broad segment of our employee and associate base. And that includes listening in our communities and listening to our diverse clients who will then help us best know how to meet their needs and help them achieve their objectives.
That's great advice. And Herschel, we have a question which comes from a dear friend of mine. Many corporations want to take action to advance anti-racism, but they don't know exactly what to do besides donating money to good causes. Do you have advice to how a company might figure out the actions which will help them to make a real difference?
Yeah, I think I will. Great question. I will build on what we were just talking about. It's not always simply about what checks you write. So we can get into check writing, or we can get into change writing, CHANGERIGHTING. And what that means really is um, what are the needs of our communities and the leaders in the segment? So if I were to ask someone, okay, what's important about community A, B, or C and anywhere in the country in state A, B, or C, what are their top 3 to 5 priorities? What are the things that they're most struggling with? And what are the things that you've learned about that in terms of how you could help solve a problem or get an opportunity, or help create access? Because oftentimes company leaders, corporate CEOs, and top leaders have access in ways that sometimes people don't always have access to, where they could maybe open up doors in an area that's not directly their discipline, their capability, or their competency, but they may be able to have the networks to create a broad, holistic way to solve problems or meet opportunities. So number one is you want to really listen and understand what are the real issues and challenges versus, hey, we're here to solve your problem and here's a check. And that is really not the best way to go forward. Obviously, we need money and funding to make programs work and to support the needs of our communities that have been woefully underserved. And so the key point is to seek to understand before you can be understood. And so that's what I would think would be a starting point. And then engage many constituents throughout your organization. Are there people from those communities in your company who can in turn offer insights and perspectives? And sometimes we don't even ask them, and they might be from those communities. So that is a starting point. But I would say you listen, you learn, and seek to understand the problems or opportunities that need to be solved.
Yes, and somebody says oftentimes companies miss the opportunity to create allyship for diverse employees, and inclusion is forgotten. What do you suggest to address that?
Um, to to include diverse allyship, if I understood the question.
Yeah, to create allyship to diverse, sometimes they miss the opportunity to create that uh, partnership with employees. What do you suggest? I think
Okay.
even, yeah.
Okay, I understand. There are really, 2 approaches here. Number one, um, you can begin to look at how do you canvas and get ideas from employee resource groups as a starting point. We have refocused our what were formerly EBRGs to now business resource networks. We've really focused them on a broader, more strategic role, and they've done some really fantastic work under our leadership, our chairs, and our sponsors to set a framework for garnering and capturing ideas across multiple perspectives, and we have to do a much better job of leveraging them, not as an afterthought, but as a forethought. And so I think that is really important. And also looking at certain community partners and alliances that you have to come in and share what can we do differently? What can we do better? What are the things that you're hearing about us, and what can we change? What can we do to become more effective in service of our community? So we don't have to have all of the answers internally, but all around us is a wonderful ecosystem of talent and competency and capabilities that we can leverage without just defaulting to let's pull the same group and the same folks together to get, in many cases, some of the same ideas and solutions. So there's a great opportunity to here to leverage, external partners, and number two, your internal resource groups in a way that's a strategic forethought and not an afterthought.
I think the question here, another question comes in. I think it may have missed a word like if senior leadership, particularly HR leadership, is necessarily maybe not supportive of communication efforts, of D&I efforts, and tries to block innovation, communication vehicles such as podcasts and other similar communication channels. What to do in those cases, and where they might go, I guess, and how to unblock.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And to your point earlier, this is not easy work. There was a time where I had a company initiative I wanted to lead, and it took me over 100 meetings. And I think one of the leaders told me, Herschel, what part of no do you not understand? Is it the N or is it the O? And the point is, I'm not saying that needs to be normal, but when you're committed and passionate about something, it's not easy to have someone stop you. And so I think the first thing is understand what is the problem or opportunity you're trying to solve, and what will be the benefit for those individuals who need to okay or confirm a decision, so that they can really understand we're not just coming up with an idea willy-nilly, but we're trying to say here's a way that these podcasts and communications are going to help us get at better ways to get our messages across, or to get new insights and feedback that'll help us be more effective, and also perhaps get ideas that could allow us to change initiatives or approaches or processes that make us a more attractive place for people to work, join, and stay. So I think the work, it's never just going to be easy as someone rolling out the red carpet for you, but we also know part of this work is about a commitment to really staying focused on the need and doing what it takes within parameters of what's acceptable and what's desirable and what is, again, respectful, that moves you towards maybe influencing them in a different way. So when you hear the no first time, you got 99 more opportunities to go. So, but in any event, I think that's a really good question, and we have to find ways to continue to support each other, because it can get frustrating at times, where you could rely on your associates and colleagues to add insights as well, who may also provide some ways to help you. So don't go it alone, go it together with the team, and I think you can help get greater success.
Herschel, knowing you over the time that I have, you told me some stories about how you put people in situations where they saw that, they were then the minority, and they were in with, people like me or you, where, they were influenced by how you did show them a new path, a new way. And I think the influencing skills, you have your stories, which I've heard some of them, which how could they disagree with you after that, right? And maybe you want to tell one of those stories to end on.
Okay. Well, I think the importance there is, as we said earlier with Beverly Tatum's work on how do you ensure leaders are not insular, that they really are in tune to what's going on across multiple perspectives. And one example that I shared was we were going to an event in Washington, D.C., hosted by Alfred Street Baptist Church, a well-known church from 1803. Pastor Howard John Wesley, one of the top leaders and pastors in the nation, was actually sponsoring a career fair with HBCUs, which was very innovative and certainly out of the box to create opportunities for students. And somewhere close to 20, 25,000 people were going to be there, mostly Black or African American or BIPOC. And one of the individuals who was offered to go, who is a white individual from Appleton, Wisconsin, very bright, smart individual, chose to go. And during that process, he learned so much. He gained some wonderful insights, and that whole weekend was working on recommendations to create new partnerships. And then he told me that was one of the most meaningful times of his life, spending it there in Washington, D.C. And so I think that was just an example of creating an opportunity to do your best work in an environment that isn't always what you're comfortable and used to.
I think if we get out of our comfort zones and put ourselves in the shoes of other people, sometimes our understanding really is broadened. So Herschel, Herndon, I want to thank you so much for sharing a little bit of your experiences and your wisdom and all that you're doing. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Well, thank you. And everyone, as I said, be safe, be well. We hope that in 10 or 20 years or 30 years, history is looking on us now to see how we came through some very difficult times using diversity and inclusion and other approaches. So let's make sure that in the future they look back on us with pride to say they did the right thing back in 2020 when we were facing unprecedented challenges. And let's move forward together and do some great things moving forward.
Yes, and individually and collectively, we can really change this planet and society and make it much more inclusive. So thank you to Herschel. Thank you to our audience. Thank you to Thrivent. Thank you for being with us today, and stay tuned for our next webinar.